Welcome to Well, Why Not? Conversations about opening your mind, then your passport. My name is Deborah and I'm a first-generation Haitian American who decided to leave the U.S. several times during my adult life. Currently, I live in Quito, Ecuador, where I've been for the past 4 years. I'd like to share more about my journey with you and invite others who have taken the leap to move away from the familiar, mainly in the form of immigration or expatriation. Greetings. For those of you tuning in for the first time, welcome. And for those of you who have listened to previous episodes, welcome back. So the title of today's episode is What Being Black and Abroad Means to Me. And I wanted to talk about this a little more in depth because I think the term Black and Abroad is so broad. It's a big topic, and so many different cultures and just people fall under that umbrella. So I was thinking, like, what does that mean to me personally when we talk about that? I've seen other travelers and expatriates kind of, discuss what their experience has been and how, it's impacted them and how they view themselves, how they see that they are viewed depending on their location. So for me, I think it starts with just being Haitian and identifying as a Haitian. I remember in college, I took this religious studies course, and at some point, and it was taught by a Catholic priest. And during the course, he was talking about his experiences with pretty much all the major religions. And he's studied with Buddhist monks. He's of course, explored Christianity as a whole, and also Hinduism. He had some experience there. And somebody asked him the question, well, after studying so many different religions, didn't that ever make you doubt the religion that you chose? And he said no. To the contrary, it actually reinforced his beliefs and his choice. And I didn't understand it then, and I probably still don't really understand it now because that hasn't been my experience with religion. But I do understand it as it relates to how I identify as a Haitian. So even living in different countries, being exposed to different cultures and traditions and all of that, it never made me waver in how I identified, or it never made me go, oh, I'm just going to drop all these things that I've been doing my whole life and pick these up because, they sound better. It's a weird dichotomy because I can absolutely appreciate the good things that I've seen in other countries and in other communities, but I just always somehow tie it back to my own. And if it means tweaking my own a little bit, so that I it better just reflects my experiences and just supports my overall growth as a person. That's one thing, but it's never made me doubt why as a Haitian I do things a certain way, or why in our culture we see things this way. And it's, I don't know if I've always felt that way. I'm sure there was a time as a teenager when I just wanted to fit in. It wasn't so easy to do, but it definitely, as I've been exposed to more places, communities, people, I just keep going back to, we do, in Haiti, or, as Haitians, we do this way, and that's okay. We just do things differently. So I think I finally understood what the priest meant in that moment. I also, aside from, first and foremost, identifying as a Haitian, I know that it's not written on my forehead. And I know that when people see me, they just see a Black woman. They don't necessarily know right off the bat from where. There are a lot of assumptions that come with just being a Black woman. So depending on where I am, it may be the assumption that I'm from Africa, or it may be the assumption that I'm African American. It's interesting. I don't feel like it's ever like being from the Caribbean is ever the assumption. Actually, no. Because of the Trinidadian and Jamaican migration that happened in Venezuela years ago, when I was in Venezuela, there were times people would, especially when they heard me speak English, not necessarily, not for accent, but just because they heard, oh, she's speaking English, she must be from Trinidad or she must be from Jamaica. So, but overall, I think my experience isn't that. It's just, yeah, they just see a Black person. They're not seeing me and going, oh, she must be Haitian. So, so I accept that too. I don't think that that's anybody's fault. I don't think that they should know automatically. I think the onus is on them to ask if they would like to know more about my culture or, my background. So I kind of carry myself with that burden, so to speak, of, okay, I'm being seen as a Black person. So in some way, shape, or form, I'm representing Black people. And it is now, I say that as a burden because I know that we are such a diverse race that, one person or one group can't represent the whole race. Again, it goes back to if a person really wants to know about a person, they have to just ask questions. You can't think that, oh, she has brown skin or she is a Black person, then she must do X, Y, and Z, or she must think this way. But I even having that hope that people would take that responsibility if they really want to know more about me, that's just not how it is, right? So I know when I walk into a space or when I'm, visiting somewhere or introducing myself, whatever it may be, there initially comes this representation factor. And actually, I say it's a burden just because I don't want people to generalize. But at the same time, I'm proud. And I'm always, I think for what I've found myself doing over time is actually being even more proud, and wanting to kind of prove people wrong on what I sometimes know that they're already thinking. And that, it's not necessary. It's not, I know that if somebody has prejudices, an interaction with me may not necessarily change that, but there is an effort I think I make, especially when I'm in a space where I'm the only one. So yeah, you try to, and I think I talked about this, when I talked more about my learning languages journey, it was one of the reasons, like I didn't want a language to be another barrier for me, something else that they could say, or or just, being out there would keep me from building stronger connections or really becoming a part of something else, or even learning from other people. I wanted to eliminate as many barriers as I could, and I definitely believe that language is one of them. So that's another way that I know that if I can speak the language, I will. if I know that somebody, their English is maybe not their first language, and they're much more comfortable in a language that I do speak, that is, for me, another way that I kind of show it's not what you think. And I don't, again, it's not across the board. I'm sure there are people that don't even think that when they hear me speak the language, but in my experience, they are often more surprised than not. So even if it's because I'm Black or because I identify as an American as well, then there's this idea that no, we don't really make an effort to learn other people's languages, and if you do, then it's wow. I think another big piece for me, being a Black person abroad, is just appreciating my privilege. I never take for granted that, even though, again, there are so many barriers, there's so many reasons that I shouldn't be abroad, that I shouldn't have access to travel as much as I do. I do. So I always think, even in those moments, especially in those moments of awe, of like, wow, this is amazing that I'm getting to experience this and learn about new places. I know that there are a lot of people who look like me who don't have that privilege, and sometimes it's also because they don't know that it's even a possibility. Like nobody ever told them that yes, you can achieve this, or that this is a possibility for you if you want it. So I feel that my privilege is in various ways. It's not just having the resources. It's not just having access with my passport. It's also just having grown up in an environment that told me, like, this is, if you want to do this, you can. Whatever you want to do, you can do. So, moving abroad was not taken off that list. So, I also like to remind myself of that. And maybe that's also why I like to talk about my decision and how I came to the decision so much, because I think the more people, especially people who look like me, see that it is doable, that it's attainable, that it's, within the realm of possibility, then the more people will try. And I don't think it's for everybody, but I think it's also worth trying, whether it's just traveling or actually, choosing to live in a different country for a short period of time versus long term. I think it's worth trying, and it does build something inside of you that I don't know of any other experience that can bring out those skills and can challenge you in the same way. Another big thing for me about that has kind of marked my experience being abroad is just recognizing that my personality is multifaceted, in the sense, depending on where I am, depending on the language I'm speaking, my personality will shift or adjust. And I think before I would have thought that I wasn't being genuine or I wasn't being authentic if I was shifting that way. And over time, I've realized, no, this is actually me being respectful, and this is me adapting as I should. I would expect, and I always break it down to like somebody coming into your home. Somebody comes into your home, you expect them to adjust to your rules, adjust to your norms. You don't necessarily, and of course, as a good host, you want the person to be comfortable. But if somebody comes in and just does everything the way that they would do in their home, and those things just happen to be contrary to the way you do things, it doesn't make for a good experience. You don't necessarily want to invite that person back. So that's how I always talk about traveling and going into new cultures and new spaces, is you have to be respectful and you have to be mindful of the differences. Like you aren't, you sometimes don't know exactly what is acceptable, what is not. And it's important you observe and you're not doing anything that seems, out of the norm for the majority. And I think that's also impacted my language learning. So I learned, especially because I learned languages through immersion. So I was getting culture with it. I wasn't just learning it through a professor or by reading books or by, listening to recordings and things like that. I was actually part of a culture and saw the intonations and the cadence and the way they said things and the words that they would use and the words they wouldn't use. So it makes sense that my personality kind of changes depending on where I am and the language I'm speaking. But I just, again, it's taken me a while to become okay with that. And not only okay, like happy with that. I think it's enriched my experience as a whole, being able to communicate, and I think it's communicating in a way that makes the other person a little bit more comfortable as well, because there's a bit of a familiarity with my communication style, and it's recognizable. Especially, I've had experiences, especially like speaking Spanish to Spanish speakers in the U.S. I don't know why, but it tends to always be my experience when I can kind of pick up, not necessarily in like South Florida, like where it's very common, but definitely I've had this experience in California where, I don't know, the person may not, they just didn't expect it. And then you say, hey, it's okay if you want to speak Spanish. And then there's just this sense of calm and like relief. Oh, good. and then it becomes a whole different conversation and experience, I notice. So I'm actually very glad that my personality has expanded. I guess that's a better way to put it than to say I have several different personalities. It's just very, it's diverse, and I'm able to adapt easily. And I think it's also not only that I don't even see it just as I'm making the other person a little bit more comfortable because they're recognizing something familiar in me. I'm also more comfortable because I sense that the person is a little bit more relaxed, a little more open. So then I think I benefit from it as well. It's not something that I even have to make a great effort to do anymore. Maybe in the beginning, maybe it was a little bit harder in the beginning stages of learning languages, but now that I've kind of gone in between, switched languages, at one point I actually did think about this, like code switching. And I think because code switching does have this negative connotation, and for those of you, I have to remember that that is a very American term, but code switching just refers to usually for minorities, especially like African Americans, having to just change the way that they speak English, or even sometimes their behaviors based on who they're around. So when they're around a predominantly white audience or, group, they act one way. And then once they get around people who look like them, then they will act a different way. And I know there's been some debate on that. I actually think it's a perfectly normal thing. And I always think maybe it's because I grew up doing it, because I did it. I switched more because I was switching between home, between my Black friends, and also being in a predominantly white community. So I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily a negative thing. Like I said, for me, it wasn't. It can be tiring. I know that some people feel like, no, this is too much. Like I should just be able to speak and act one way and people should accept me. I agree with that too. That's just not been my experience. And then I think adding on to that, being abroad, and knowing that I can't act like an American when I'm not in the United States, like those types of and that's normal, that's respectful. I think that's also changed my perspective on code switching, but it is very much the same thing. And again, I think that's why in the beginning I struggled with it, and I thought, why am I changing my personality just, based on where I am? And it's not like, and I think saying I changed my personality is a strong term. It's just my mannerisms change, the volume of my voice, like little things. It's if from the outside, somebody seeing me speaking like Haitian Creole and then somebody seeing me speak English, it'll look like two different people. And I've actually had people say that. They're like, do you know you like morph into another person when you speak Haitian Creole? And I was like, till it was said, I didn't realize it. And then I thought more and I said, yeah, because, Haitian Creole is just, it's a very different language, and there's so much we speak with a lot of emotion, we speak loudly, like there's it just to me was like, yeah, that makes sense for me to not speak English. I think that would be actually bizarre for me to speak English like I spoke Haitian Creole and vice versa. So that I think those are my big points. There's so much, there's a lot more, obviously. Like I'm thinking back to my episode called Being Black as an Experience. And this is why, because there's just so many layers to it. There's so much, that's tacked on to having darker skin. It's really that simple. There is a lot more. We just experience life in a different way. We see things differently. We're perceived differently. But those, I think, are the big points for me in terms of how I think being Black and abroad has impacted me, or has helped me to grow, and how the experience in and of itself is for me day to day, because those three things, I think I see them happen every day. Every day I'm appreciating my privilege. Every day I'm in a situation where I kind of feel like I'm representing the whole race, and then just, speaking the different languages and seeing myself kind of go back and forth and feeling my energy almost change depending on the language I'm speaking. That happens too. It's pretty incredible, I think. So that is it for today's episode. Let me know if you identify with anything that I've said, because you may be feeling these same things even at home. All right, until the next time, be well.